Hello, welcome back to Sextras.
Where we talk about sex and all the extras.
I'm Honey.
And I'm Maria.
And welcome back to our Masculinity miniseries.
Welcome back. Talking about men.
I love to talk about men. It's my favourite topic. Clearly.
I actually have been quite enjoying, sort of because of the miniseries and stuff, I feel like when we've encountered men and like there was the launch party for the magazine, guys, check it out, sextrasworld.com. That's the new website and that's where the magazine lives. But there was a little launch party and like there were lots of men there, and I feel like I talked to a lot of them about this kind of stuff because it came up, you know, in conversation that we were doing this mini series, and I feel like I've had a lot of like really interesting conversations, so I have been quite enjoying it, to be fair.
Yeah, me too. This week we're going to talk about male friendships, and I feel like you were saying, my only male friends were the ones that were at that launch, and I kind of think they might be like seconds away from killing me because of how often I've brought up this conversation. Like on Saturday I was outside with like a couple of friends, and this guy came up to me and he was like, oh, so what's the magazine gonna be like? What are you talking about in terms of masculinity? And I was like, oh, we're talking about male friendships. And then another friend that I've already spoken to loads about this game, and he was like, oh, fuck's sake, honey, like, stop bringing this up.
Yeah, I've been having conversations like with Shane about it, and then he'll kind of like randomly be like, oh yeah, but that's the kind of real man that I want to be, like, you know, like just jokingly, like, because we've just been having a lot of those kind of conversations, so it's quite funny.
Yeah, it's so funny, but it's also so interesting because I feel like this is not something that men necessarily talk about a ton,
or think
amongst
about
themselves,
even.
or think about. So I think they do like us talking to them about it. Like, I think they are open to the conversation, and talking about them kind of makes sense why, because it's honestly it's dire out there. Like, it's not good vibes for men at all.
Yeah, when Honey was like sort of conducting some research for this episode, you know, we were talking to like our male friends and hearing their thoughts about it. She just texted me being like, I just had a conversation with like one of my friends about this, and I'm honestly traumatized, like I had to leave. And she's like being so dramatic about how like depressed it made her for like a whole week after.
No, it made me so sad. I literally had this conversation at the pub. It was like me and one other girl at the pub with like 15 men, right, for my friend's birthday. And we start talking to them about male friendships, and it was so depressing. Like, it started with just one guy, and he was being really open to the conversation, telling us his thoughts, like, yeah, I kind of feel like I make more effort than my other friends, blah blah blah, we'll get into it. And then other guys started joining, and they were like, oh, why the fuck would I talk about my feelings with other men? Like, just the more men came into it, the more macho and like masculine it got. And me and this girl were looking at each other like, is this a cry for help? Like, are they okay? I went home and I wrote like 2,000 words about this interaction on my laptop because I was like, this is so depressing. Like, I can't believe this is how men live. So that's just a little insight into what the episode is going to be about. So in this episode, we kind of want to talk about like male friendships with other men, what those are like, how depressing we think it is, if there's any hope for them.
Just caveat, like, this is sort of from conversations that we've had with men in our lives. Like, it's not really like, we're not saying this is the be all end all. Like, I'm sure that like female friendships, it varies, you know, from friendship to friendship, from like man to man, whatever. But this is just like the feedback that we've received, and also I guess just inherently like a female perspective on it, you know, like yeah, it's not like factual information. This is just like our opinion and like what we've heard from the men around us
Well,
and
yeah,
stuff.
and also what the men have told us, like that is
Yeah.
like we're not just making it up. I feel like we've both, in preparation, knowing that we were gonna do this episode for kind of a long time, we've been consciously, as you said, having these conversations with men. Like I talked to my granddad about it. I've been speaking to quite a few men about it, and yeah, so this is just gonna like kind of sum up, but that, yeah, there obviously are exceptions and stuff, but I feel like in the news recently as well, there's been, well, not the news, but you know, like media in general, there's been quite a lot about male friendships, like even in sex education with like Otis and Eric and stuff, how men kind of, you know, understand each other's feelings and ask each other questions and how involved they are in their lives. Not that sex education is really reflective of any reality, like at all, but my thoughts on that can be left for another time. So, caveats over. Oh, also, sorry, last caveat is that we are going to talk about it in terms of like men and women, but there's obviously so much in between that. We want to talk about queerness and how that plays into it and stuff as well, but this is we are aware, this is a very essentialist kind of conversation. So sorry about
Yeah,
that.
very true.
So yeah, what have you learnt in your research / conversations you've had for this episode?
Well, I feel like it's pretty interesting because, like, in the conversations that you had, you came away from them, like, you know, saying, like, is this a cry for help? Like, this is really bad, and, like, this is, like, a really scary image into sort of this question that we're asking. But in the conversations that I had, I feel like I heard pretty positive things. To be fair, I didn't talk to that, like, I'm not that close with that many men, but I guess like their closest friendships were like with other men, the guys that I did talk to, and they seemed to have like very good things to say, like kind of a view of like, oh, it's not really like any different to what you would consider a friendship. Like we do talk about deep stuff, like yeah, maybe it's not like every time we see each other or whatever, but like if something's up, I know that I can open up to my friends and they know they can open up to me. But like something I did hear is like there's just like some men that will like always like share stuff with the group and whatever, like some of the guys, and then some of them like just never, like you don't really like know about their life and shit basically. But yeah, it was pretty positive. Like it was very much like I do feel like they have my back, we can talk about our feelings, like I feel like we do check in with each other. One of my good friends that I asked, who's like kind of in a group of all girls and he's like the only guy, I was kind of asking him a lot of questions of like how is it different like when you hang out with like just your guy friends versus like us, like in conversation specifically, like what kind of stuff comes up. And he was saying that, to be fair, it is like a lot more deeper more often with girls, like because it seems kind of like we don't find stuff deep almost. It's like you're like diving into like your trauma, but it's just like a normal like coffee off like afternoon coffee kind of vibes, you know, whereas guys wouldn't really do that. Like, and this is also something like my boyfriend said as well, that like it's not that they don't open up, but like they would never do that if it's like a group. Like they'd only really go into like deep stuff or like even the goss like when it's like just one-on-one or like 3 people. And I definitely do see that, I guess, like even from what you were kind of saying earlier about how like when more men kind of started chiming in, and sort of this view also that we were talking about in the previous episode, that like men like really enforce like this masculinity on each other, or like not even masculinity, but just like once like more men are in, like the more men are in the mix, the more like manly you have to be, or whatever it seems to be. And like it seems like men find it easier to like open up to women, or at least when it's like just one-on-one, and maybe there's not like that much of that pressure. Like I don't know what it is, because obviously, to be fair, I think that's true for everyone. Like I find it definitely easier to open up when it's one-on-one, but like I definitely would like dish out my goss in front of like the whole group kind of vibe. Like I wouldn't really think about that, but I guess I would like, I don't know, I guess, yeah, there are certain things that I probably would just do like one-on-one. So I don't know, that's kind of what I also kept coming back to, that I felt like, yeah, I feel like this could kind of apply to anyone. Like, I really feel like it's not even necessarily like men versus women. It's just more like the kind of person that you are. Because I do feel like there are, even in our friend group, which is like all women and like a gay guy, I feel like there's people that will open up and like really dish out all the shit. Like Shane was saying, like my boyfriend was saying about his friends, that there's certain people that will always be talking about stuff, and then there's certain people that is like really rare for them to open up and like share something deep. And I feel like that's like true for any friend group. So I don't know, that's kind of what I kept thinking. It's just like, is it just depends what kind of person you are, or like is there really like a bigger picture? But because I didn't really talk to that many people, I do feel like I didn't really get that much of a bigger picture. But yeah, and then another thing was they're like meaner, I guess, like the humor and like kind of like being close with someone is like roasting them and like, yeah, kind of like being mean, I guess, which like, again, I'm sure there's many women that have that sense of humor, but I do feel like that's definitely less rare. Like, I don't feel like, I don't feel like the roasting is like to the same level. It's like in just like a male group. I'm not sure, but yeah. What about you, hun?
Yeah, I mean, I do feel like similar what you're saying in terms of it depends on what kind of person you are. And I think, again, there's people in our friendship group that maybe share more than others. We're probably both on the side that shares the most. And I think for women in general, it's more like accepted to share your feelings if you want to. Like, it's kind of like if you know if you want to, you can. Whereas I think in my conversations that I had with men that I met or that I know, they were saying that they think about sharing their feelings and then there's something like a voice in their head that kind of stops them. And it's like, oh no, but like, especially in a big group of guys, like, oh no, you're a man, don't say that, like that's just not what's done. And they all kind of agreed when I was asking them, like, yeah, that's just not the done thing. And I was like, well, why? Like, where do you think that comes from? And they're like, oh, that's just so moist, and like, oh, that's just like how I was raised, and those are the kind of messages you like absorb growing up and stuff, it seems like. And I spoke to my friend from uni who uses like he, they pronouns, and he basically said in his experiences with men who he's not really friends with, like he's mostly friends with non-men, the way that they interact is like they'll go to the pub and get drunk, and then sometimes they'll start talking about their feelings like only once they're drunk or tipsy, as kind of a way to process how they're feeling. And like that's really exhausting when it's kind of not reciprocated, like you're kind of being trauma dumped on in a not very coherent way, and then people don't really ask you the same questions back, or you don't feel like people want to know how you're feeling. And if you do just kind of start talking about it, people will assume like, oh, you're gay, or like, you know, that kind of thing. Also, the guys that I spoke to at the pub were saying kind of the same thing, like they never make plans to hang out one-on-one, really.
Yeah.
It's usually just like a who's around tonight, let's hang out.
Yeah.
It's never in advance. It's always to go to the pub, get drunk. They never go to dinner. They never like hang out sober.
Yeah, I heard that as well, like what you were saying, like not really like talking about your feelings until you're like drunk. Alcohol is kind of the gateway to everything, essentially, in the friendships.
Yeah, that's the kind of general sense that I got. And also like in terms of asking questions as well, like you wouldn't pry unless someone brings it up.
Yeah, that one is, I heard that so much, is like you only talk about it if like you're getting questions about, like if someone's asking or like bringing it up. Like you would never just ask questions about something that, like if you know your friend is going through something, you would never be like, oh, how's this going, like unless they initially bring it up.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, and I feel like that's something that happens in female friendships. Like if someone doesn't ask you something I feel like I would make a mental note, like, why haven't they asked me, kind of thing. Not in like a grudge kind of way. I'd just be like, that's so weird. Like, why didn't we talk about that, you know? Or like, why didn't
Yeah.
I bring it up? Or why didn't they ask?
Yeah, true.
And
And
it's
I
usually
would
not for any deep reason. It's just because like you were talking about something else. You know what I mean?
I would never like find it weird if, or like too much if like I had told a friend about something and they were asking me about it. Like I would never be like, oh my god, like why are they prying?
Yeah. Or even if like I hadn't brought it up and someone just asked me out of the blue like something quite personal, I'd just be like, yeah, okay, fair enough. Like that's a normal conversation to have, kind of thing. And well, I spoke to my grandparents about it, and they were saying it's kind of interesting because I think it's like a generational divide, but it's also a gendered divide, because my granddad was saying he's never talked to his friends about about their feelings unless it's like someone's died or they've gone through a divorce, and they'd maybe ask like once, you know, like call up and be like, oh, how are you doing? But you wouldn't just like randomly check in. And he has like loads of like, my grandparents have a lot of friends and they have really close friends, but they, from my perspective, who his best friend is, he has like hour-long phone calls with him, but they just talk about things that are like going on in the news and like general knowledge. And someone kind of said that as well in our survey that we did. Like they said, I think it was a man answering the question, like with their male friends they talk more about like knowledge and current events, and with women it's more like feelings or like gossip or whatever. And there's this theory that I wanted to talk about called genderlect. It's a theory from the 90s, and it is a theory, like obviously this isn't like, it's just observational, I think. And it basically says that men speak to each other to convey knowledge or to reach like an end point in the conversation, and women speak to each other because they like enjoy the process of the conversation, which is obviously a huge generalization and essentialist and whatever. But I think it's kind of interesting because even in that conversation I was having at the pub, like it was definitely a conversation. Like you could tell when I was asking them questions that they were really thinking about it, until more men started coming in, and then it kind of became like, oh, I'm gonna say this as like kind of, you know, to make them laugh or like to divert the conversation away from this because this is like, you know, too intense or whatever. And then it went immediately back to like, oh, did you know this and this, which I feel like, I don't know, I never really have those conversations with my friends unless it's like relevant, kind of thing.
Yeah, it's so true. I even like feel it in having conversations. I'm just like thinking I have so many conversations with my boyfriend. It's like he is so like never wants to like, you know, he's not like a talking about your feelings kind of person. So he'll just like really like laugh shit off or like change the topic. And yeah, I definitely see like in the stuff that, well, he even was telling me like, yeah, with his friends he'll like just talk about like sports or like what's going on in the world, like that kind of stuff. Not really like, yeah. And like when I kind of try to have those conversations with him, it's like it's not really a thing.
Yeah. No, it's so interesting. But I wanted to say as well, like in terms of, we asked in the survey like if people are attracted to men in, or like masculinity in a platonic way, and someone said that it's hard to be accepted by girls even as a non-masc man, and this pushed me to develop stronger male friendships. Conversations do vary. With girls it's more conversations about other girls, like gossip, while with guys it's more about things going on in the world.
Plus, when we do gossip as guys, we just don't have the details, so convo never that long. Oh my god, that's like a genius sentence. Like, yeah, why do they not have details? Like,
why do they not ask follow-up questions?
Yeah, I'm so confused. But like, why are they not interested in the details? It's like that's where the interest in the story arises. Like, that's where it becomes a story. I'm so confused. Like, why do you not care?
Yeah, exactly. Like, me and my uni friends were talking about this. Like, they'll go, because they're in like long distance relationships with their boyfriends, so they'll like go visit them or whatever, and they kind of know their flatmates and stuff, and they're like, oh, that your flatmate's like seeing this girl, what's going on with that? And the guy's like, the boyfriend's like, wait, really, do you think so? And my friend's like, yeah, like, why is she just here all the time? And he's like, oh, I hadn't really thought of that. And she's like, do you not ask questions? Like, whose bed do you think she's staying in? Or why are you not asking for details? And like their friend, they'll be like, oh yeah, my friend just broke up with their girlfriend or whatever. And she'll be like, oh, what happened? And he'll be like, oh, I don't know, I didn't ask. And she's like, what do you mean you didn't ask?
Mate, honestly, it's just like, because, you know, like when we'd been friends for a while, it's like, you know me, and like then when we're like dish about something, you're like, oh yeah, like, and I was remembering like all the details because like I know you like the details. And like I thought that this would one day happen with my boyfriend, you know, like I thought that he would one day come and be like, I know you want the details, but he still does not come with the details. I literally, even when he's going to have the conversation, like I know he's gonna go get that goss like that night, and I'm like, remember the stuff so you can tell me later. And then he does even remember the stuff, and it's nothing. It's literally just like the fact of what happened. It's like, I don't give a fuck about the fact of what happened. I want to understand why, like how everyone feels about it. Like otherwise, like this isn't juicy. This is not goss. Like why do you not get the goss?
No, it's actually infuriating. It's so annoying. But sorry, just to go back to this, I found the thing that I was looking for. Someone said, I feel more comfortable when conversing with new men. Women are often overly friendly and behave very familiar too quickly when first meeting, which can come across as disingenuous, whereas with men it seems a lot more easy and genuine and less expectations to act in a certain way. However, often my conversations with familiar men are a lot less profound than with women. Not always, but sometimes women go more in depth and detailed when talking, and men often stay surface, which I feel like is an interesting like segue into talking about male and female friendships, because obviously everything we've been saying has kind of been like our interpretation of these male friendships and the situations and stuff, but I think there's just a lot of assumptions on like either side. Like men have a lot of assumptions about female friendships and women have a lot of assumptions about male friendships, and they might be true or not, but I think that causes like a lot of skepticism when it comes to like actually making friends with other genders, even though obviously like there are people, like some people have way more male friends than we do. So maybe it's just an us problem. But yeah, I think there's just a lot of stereotypes, and from what I got in the survey with like men talking about women, it's that they kind of feel like there's a lot of expectation to present a certain way or to like get deep too soon or open up or whatever, and they're worried about being accepted, whereas with women they feel like worried that men are gonna make some kind of like misogynistic comment, or that they're only friends with them because they want to sleep with them kind of thing, which isn't always the case. Obviously, like, I don't think that that's true even like 70% of the time, but that's definitely
if
something
I were
that
to
needs...
put a percentage.
Like, I think that that's something that needs to be considered, because like, why do women not feel attracted to masculinity as like a trait in a friend? Why is that not something that we're seeking out? Like, I feel like it's sad because obviously not to make it seem really one-sided, but like obviously men do get something out of being friends with women. Like, there's a way to process your emotions, and I think that they do really enjoy that like gossip in female spaces or whatever. And women obviously enjoy being friends with men too. But if there's like a sexual barrier or like, you know, a safety issue, and you feel like people aren't trying to understand your like emotional perspective on things, that is a problem in my mind.
Yeah.
Thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, I mean, obviously, I feel like it's definitely like I don't think it's like completely unfounded, this like fear from women, not fear, but like, yeah, this kind of hesitation from women in being friends with men. Because I'm not even sure about how I like what I think about this. Like, I kind of do think that like most men would sleep with their girlfriends if they were down. Like, I genuinely believe that. So I'm kind of like,
and several people said that in the survey
and lots
too.
of that, but that's the thing. Lots of people don't even have a problem with that. I just have a problem with that. I feel like I can't be like fully friends with someone if I'm not like 100% sure that it's just like a friends thing. Like, and I feel like I can't see a friend in like a sexual way. It's kind of like, I don't know if that's like a me problem. Like, I know that there's plenty of people that like don't see this as an issue really. Like even queer people, you know what I mean? It's like, yeah, I'd sleep with like, it's not even a gender thing. It's just like, I'd sleep with my friend and like, yeah, who cares kind of vibe, you know? But yeah, I don't know. I do see how that would like put a bit of a block. Like, I feel like there is also a big thing of like girls wanting to be friends with guys because it's like less drama and like guys are just so funny.
Yeah.
And guys are so
and I feel
chill.
like that's why people hate pick me's so much, because it's like this whole thing of male validation and like those parts of ourselves that we kind of hate the most, you know what I mean? Like, no one wants to admit that like they seek male validation, because I think like we all do to an extent, because that's just kind of like how we've been programmed in a way. Like, someone said in the survey that they have to stop themselves putting men on a pedestal and acknowledge or remind themselves that just because they have a dick doesn't make them more powerful than you know what I mean? Like, I think it's such a catch-22 situation because of how men often communicate, like trying to convey knowledge or whatever, or like, you know, one up each other in that sense. I feel like having knowledge when you're interacting with them gives you some kind of authority or like power in the situation. And so because they're like always spouting all this knowledge and stuff, you just automatically think like, oh, they're better than me or whatever, which, like, to be honest, it doesn't really come into my mind that often. I just think of it as like, they're mansplaining, like, fuck off. But I think we are kind of like programmed to seek this male validation, and then if men then interpret that as like, oh, you're coming on too strong, or like you're a little bit intense, or like you want to fit in, or like if other women perceive you as trying to impress men because you're trying to fit in, it's like automatically just kind of shut down, and like, you know, it's seen as a bit taboo, I feel like, nowadays, to be a pick-me girl, which is not fair because we've probably all been there at some point and we've just like recovered from it, or like we are recovering from it like a fucking cold. And like, and therefore people who haven't kind of like done that yet are just like shat on in a way, which isn't really fair.
Yeah, but yeah, no, I agree. I mean, I do agree with that discourse, but I am also like, I feel like, you know, pick-me's that are like, I get that it's like a condition of the patriarchy, whatever, but like at the same time, like those pick-me's that are like putting up, I know this whole like circular argument of like, oh yeah, but like pick-me's put other women down, but then if you're putting down pick-me's, you're doing the same thing. But no, like, I'm sorry, they started it. If you're putting another woman down, then like I can put you down for that. Like, I'm not gonna put you down for like other shit, but I can put you down for that, you know. But anyway, that's my thought on the pick me situation. But yeah,
I was also gonna say, like, talking to my uni friend, he was saying that he thinks the conversations men have with other men versus the conversations they have around women are like very different, especially in terms of how they talk about sex. And I think that's something that a lot of women kind of like worry about with men, is like, oh, are they going to make a misogynistic comment? And you're probably not going to be friends with a man who does that, or you're going to call them out on it. But he was saying like the way that men would talk to him about sex with women was so like objectifying and all this stuff, and then he would see them like interacting, or like, I don't know, I guess he didn't say this, but then I guess seeing that person interact with women and like it's in a friendly way or whatever, you're kind of skeptical of what those intentions are. And I feel like I also, because of this whole male validation thing, like I'm always second guessing in the back of my mind, like, oh, are they just like friends with me so they can sleep with me? And that has been the case, you know what I mean? Like I have had a friend do that to me, so I don't think it's completely unfounded. And then like, how do you bridge that gap where you're like, oh, I should trust men and like I should want to be friends with them, because I do want to be friends with more men, but I just don't find enough of them that I'm like, oh, I really trust you enough and trust that your intentions are like just to be friends, that I want to be around you and like open up around you and stuff.
Yeah. So how would you say like the male friendships that you do have kind of compare to your female friendships? Or like, yeah, just kind of going off on that, on like wanting to make friends with guys, like why? Yeah, I don't know, like that comparison.
I feel like I have become so much closer with women more quickly because I'm way more trusting of them, like immediately, even though I'm bi and like whatever, maybe I could be friends with someone because I want to sleep with them, or they could be friends with me because they want to sleep with me as a woman, but I don't perceive women that way. So I think I'm just like way more trusting and open with them. And like, I just think there's kind of like that automatic understanding of your experience as a woman with other women, or like with other queer people, or, you know, with whoever. Obviously we all have such different experiences and like that's not always true, but there's at least that baseline. Versus like when I'm making friends with men, I feel like it's so much harder to become close to them because firstly, I don't trust them and we don't talk about our feelings at least for like a long time or like ever. And there just seems to be kind of a barrier up. And I don't know, like it just, I feel like with my male friends that I do have, we've reached a point of like, okay, we're on a good kind of level. But I also still kind of censor the questions that I ask. Like, I don't ask them the same questions that I would ask my female friends because I'm like, I don't know how this is going to be received. Like, are they going to be willing to talk about this? And I feel like I just don't share as much of myself with them as well as I do with other friends. So, I don't know. Obviously, Will is like our closest male friend. I love him to pieces. I feel like we still maybe don't talk about his emotions as much as I talk about mine. But I do think he's way more receptive to it. Like, if you ask him questions, I just think he's, like, less likely to bring it up. And I've also never seen him cry. Like,
yeah, you have.
Maybe once.
Yeah, you have. I think Will, like, does talk about his emotions a lot. And that's the thing. It's, like he'll like text the group chat if he's like really having like a down day, that kind of vibe, like even without anyone asking.
That's true.
And yeah, I don't know, I guess I just don't think of Will's feelings as like I trust when he says like how he feels, whereas I don't trust
yeah
I don't know that I trust like, but I do think maybe that also is a closeness thing, because okay, I was going back to what I was gonna say. I've only really been close, like actually friends, like real close friends with one straight man like in my life, like, and that's the only man other than Will who I've ever been friends with. And like, yeah, and honestly, I don't know like that I can like, well, I'm just not very good at like making friends with men. I always think that they want to sleep with me, or I want to sleep with them, or I just like don't really necessarily like trust what comes out of their mouth. And like, to be fair, with like that one friend, we were like so close at one point. Like I didn't trust what came out of his mouth because he was a liar, so that was like its own separate case. But like, I would trust like what I would say, you know, like kind of in terms of like, okay, coming from my side, like I would open up to him, like probably like I would say the same things to him than I would to you, kind of vibe. Like, I don't think that there was a boundary in terms of that, but there were definitely like lots of more boundaries in other places. Like there's like a lot of behavior that I just like, I wouldn't do that with him. than I would with a girl, because I just think it's like a weird boundary to cross. I don't know, it's like sexual even though it's not, you know? Like, I don't know why things just suddenly
Yeah.
become like sexual or like weird. But also because obviously I'm in a relationship, so it's like, in my head it's like that's not respectful, but like it's perfectly respectful to like do it with you. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But as in like,
Mm-hmm.
because it's a man, I would just like find it weird. Like there's just a certain level of it that
Yeah.
is just like weird. So
I think it's also because of like how it would be perceived
yeah,
from the other person. Like if I were to suddenly start like holding my straight male friend's hand, or like, you know, kissing him on the cheek and like putting my head on his shoulder, like I do with my
yeah,
female friends, I don't think he would perceive it as a friendly thing. Like I think he'd be like,
yeah, true.
okay, like time to get it on kind of thing. And
But for instance, with Will, you do
and
that. Like,
yeah, exactly, because he's not going to perceive it like I'm trying to fuck him, is he? Like he's gay. But like, I don't know, and I also don't think that men give women they're not attracted to the time of day to begin with. Like I don't think they'll even be friends with women they don't perceive as attractive, because they would never like have a conversation with her, because they just like, I don't know, that's just my perception of men. And I also have seen examples of that time and time
yeah,
again. So
I've heard so much shit about that. Like, so much shit about that.
yeah. And also like what you were saying about how you just don't trust what they say, like I think, and we've talked about this as well, that like men will just kind of tell you what you want to hear.
Yeah.
You know, like until it stops serving them, they will just tell you what you want to hear. And I don't know, it's so hard to know what they actually think.
Also, yeah, how like, you know how you've been saying how men kind of come out with this like, oh, let me like show you how much I know, and like, you know, like knowledge, like they communicate through knowledge and all of that stuff. This is like something that I've been feeling recently with like the men in my life, like my dad, my brother, like my boyfriend, my male friends. I feel like men are so defensive in a weird, like if you disagree with them, or like not disagree with them, just like, yeah, this is the thing, it's like when I'm not even disagreeing with like something that they said, if I kind of don't like agree with it, like if I kind of add something, or like, you know, if I don't like immediately just agree with it wholeheartedly, it's like they take that as like an attack, when I'm like just not, I'm like just adding something to the conversation. And I just feel like, yeah, like men just get really like weirdly defensive about shit, and they always feel like, not always, okay, I'm being really like, I'm generalizing a lot. I've as I said when I started talking about this, it's just something I've noticed recently. Like I don't know if there's something in the air, but like I just feel like the men in my life just feel like I'm always attacking them when I'm literally not.
This is what masculinity is in crisis. Like this is what this miniseries is about. Like I feel like I've experienced that too so many times, and this is why I think like the I hate men test is such a good test, without naming it as a test, for like your male companions or like relatives or like boyfriends or whatever. Also, I wrote an article about this on Sextra as well. You should go read it. But like if you say to your boyfriend or like male friend like, oh, I hate men, if they react like so defensively and they think it's like a personal thing against them, that's a massive red flag. That's like Andrew Tate kind of vibes. Like, why are you getting so upset? I obviously don't mean it about you. But you should be able to recognize that, because of my whole experience like with men and like the male species as a whole. I am like have some trepidation towards men and like how they might act around me. Why are you getting so defensive? Like I just think it's such dodgy behavior. But yeah, I wanted to talk about emotional labor as well really quickly. I'd want to do a whole episode about this, to be fair, but I think in terms of friendships, it's really interesting because like what we were saying, how men only really talk about their feelings like when they're drunk and stuff, or to their female friends. Like sometimes it is a bit much. Like I'm all for men talking about their feelings, but it's also not fair when like their only way of processing their feelings is with the women in their lives, and like you can tell that that's the first time they've talked about anything, and like they have a lot to kind of process, and you're kind of like helping them do like a lifetime of processing. And like with like relationships with men, I feel like this comes up a lot in terms of like the emotional labor you do. Like my friends have said that their boyfriends, like when they get into an argument, like one of my friends said that her boyfriend, like she went into the garden and called her best friend to talk about this massive argument that they had, and he went in like another room, and then they came back and he was like, oh, who are you speaking to? And she was like, oh, I just called my best friend. And he started crying because he was like, oh, I don't feel like I have anyone that I could call, kind of thing. But like for me, I know I have like 5 people I could call if that happened, but men don't have that. And so when they're talking about that, it's like the first time. And like I think we need to just give men that option more, so that women aren't just like kind of there as their therapist, kind of thing, because that doesn't feel good on either side. Like that's not a nice experience for anyone involved. And I also think that might be kind of like why women find it hard to make friends with men, because then it kind of comes out in really defensive ways, as you're saying, or it comes out in like mean ways, or like they just kind of like deflect those feelings onto like other things, if that makes sense. I feel like that's very vague, but I don't know. I think it's important to like acknowledge emotional labor. And also then how like men kind of shit on women for gossiping or whatever, or like getting too deep too quickly, but they also benefit from that. Like they benefit a lot from that, from the women in their lives who are able to process their feelings and help them process their feelings. So I just think it's like kind of a double standard.
And to be fair though, I also want to say, I feel like women everywhere like also really benefit from their male friends, even in just to like make a direct comparison, like in the way of like, yeah, like not everyone just wants to be like emotional and shit all the time. Like believe it or not, men, like we don't. Like sometimes we just want to like have shits and giggles, which we can do like together. I'm not saying I'm not saying women can't do that like with each other, but I do feel like there is a lot of like respite in a way, like in hanging out with men. Sometimes it's like, yeah, it just feels like really lighthearted and like, oh yeah, like I just had like a really fun afternoon, which again can also happen with women, but like I'm just, you know, I'm just trying to
yeah, and I do have so much fun with men. Like
yeah,
I feel like I sometimes have so much more fun with men in a way, but like it's obviously like a different kind of fun, because it's like a respite, and I wouldn't want that all the time. Like I think it's all about balance. I think that's what it always comes back to, is like I don't like, obviously I know I've just made so many generalizations, but I don't like that there's so many generalizations from either side. Like you can do both, like 100%. And I think that we just fall into these patterns because, especially like in the age of like toxic masculinity and like this kind of like masculinity being under crisis, like I feel like it's kind of all coming full circle of like, oh, I have to reinforce my masculinity if it's perceived by others to be like under threat, because then that's when you lose your status and stuff. Which like I had first-hand experience with in that like group conversation that I had. But like firstly, men just someone needs to just make the step and like do something different. Like just encourage your male friends to talk about their feelings, like because they are desperate to, like that's the thing, like they want to talk about it so bad. And like when I talk to them about it, I can tell that they really appreciate people actually asking them how they are, you know what I mean? And also men need to not just like men need to not just be friends with women, like if they want to sleep with them or if they want to process their emotions, you know what I mean? Like let's just forget about that. Like it's just so stupid.
Yeah, I think definitely on both sides as well. Like from like what I was saying, like I feel like I genuinely encounter men with a very different perspective, and like that's just what we shouldn't be doing. It's like, just see people as people. And I feel like that's like half of it. Because then, yeah, as you said, like, we're not coming in with all these preconceptions and like these ideas of like what this is going to be like, or what their intentions are, or like what the conversations are meant to be, and all of this shit.
I think everyone deserves to be given the same opportunity to like make friends and stuff, and it is not helping anyone for men to feel lonely or feel isolated, and like we don't want anyone to feel like that. We want to achieve gender equality, and like that's not going to happen if men don't feel like they can talk about stuff to their friends or to like the people that they love. But they, at the same time, they also do need to be better at like being allies to women and stuff. So I think it's like a little, like, obviously work needs to be done on either side, but yeah. Okay, well, anything you want to add to that? I feel like we really covered everything.
Oh, actually, I will add something. I feel like it's also just interesting, like, this is something that I've said, I won't get that much into it or anything, but like something that I've said like to all my friends recently, that is like being like in a relationship, especially like I just feel like with a man, I just feel like I can't make friends with men because I just like feel so like weirdly uncomfortable because of kind of what I was saying before, like you have to be like like you feel like you have to be respectful, and it's like not respectful if you do this with a man, but like even if you do the exact same thing with a woman, like it's fine. But yeah, also from like just talking to men, I feel like even just like men's reactions and shit, like I feel like we'll be out and whatever, and we'll like talk to men, and it's kind of like when the shoe kind of drops of like, oh, I have a boyfriend, it's like they'll either just like clearly not be interested anymore in talking to me, or like I don't know, the vibe just changes. So it's just like honestly, I'm trying to like not feel this way, but like I just feel like weirdly uncomfortable about it. So I don't know, I think it's like an interesting phenomenon, like straight women making male friends. And then also like from another side, because like I kind of like genuinely believe that I'm like, why would like my boyfriend can have female friends, like the friends he has now, but like if he like made a new female friend, I'd be like, but for what? So like you don't need to do that. You have me. Like what the fuck? So yeah, I don't know. I feel like it's a bit of a weird one. Like straight women in relationships making friends with straight men. It's weird.
Yeah. No, that's a good point. But everyone should just be friends, is our conclusion.
Yeah.
Okay, well, that is that for our male friendships episode. Please feel free to give us feedback. Tell us if we're just completely wrong, or like what your experience with this is. We would love to hear. You can do all of that you can email us, sextraspodcast@gmail.com. You can find us on Instagram, Facebook and TikTok at sextrasworld, and you can find our podcast and our magazine at sextrasworld.com. You can pitch us as well for either the podcast or the magazine, like as a guest on the podcast. And yeah, we'll be back next week with a really great episode with activist Ben Hurst to talk about like online misogyny, how we can move towards like a more positive perception of masculinity, which we definitely need. And yeah, we'll see you next week.
Bye.
You've been listening to Sextras, presented by Honey Jane Wyatt and Maria Jose Hayodatiyi, produced by Mabel Productions.